Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. In St. Clair County, Illinois, the state's attorney is the chief law enforcement officer as well as the chief legal advisor. Brendan Kelly was appointed as the St. Clair County state's attorney in 2010, filling a vacancy created by the election of then state's attorney Robert Haida to the circuit judge. Prior to that, Mr. Kelly served as the clerk of the circuit court. After graduating from St. Louis University School of Law, Brendan Kelly became an assistant state's attorney, prosecuting felony, juvenile, DUI, child support cases. In 2008, he became the youngest elected clerk of the circuit courts in Illinois. Since his appointment to the state's attorney position, Mr. Kelly has established the Violent Crime Unit, through which the most heinous criminal cases are pursued. Domestic violence prosecutions have increased 117% in St. Clair County since the Tracy Fogarty Domestic Violence Unit was established. He has worked closely with school districts through the St. Clair County Juvenile Justice Council to reduce parent-caused school truancy. Mr. Kelly has also gone after public corruption in St. Clair County. He's a busy man who has taken time to be with us today. Brendan Kelly, welcome to Conversation.
Thank you, sir.
You are a busy guy.
Well, in St. Clair County, as a state's attorney, usually you don't have a shortage of things you need to do every day.
Yeah, we'll get into that too. I hate pinpointing the name East St. Louis.
Sure.
Because there are I've been in East St. Louis. And there are very nice houses. There are whole areas that are very nice, but unfortunately there's enough people there who cause you problems, cause the police problems,
sure,
that they have become well known.
That's true. It is unfortunate. It is a place where you have a lot of very good people that are trying to live their lives in a law-abiding way, in a productive way, to be good citizens. But I think what you've seen is with the number of people that have left the community, you're left with a good number of folks that have no other place to go. They have no way out. And you have sort of a deteriorating social base, which can cause this sort of pancake effect of poverty, violence, corruption. It all kind of feeds on itself. And I think that unfortunately, the reputation that we have to overcome, the thing that we have to keep fighting on a daily basis, and I think that we're making some progress on it, is that reputation for violent crime, that reputation for a homicide rate, which is per capita the highest in the country. And that's the big challenge for us. There are many things we have to deal with on a daily basis in St. Clair County in terms of law enforcement, in terms of public safety, but clearly in terms of the challenges we face as a region, it's not just St. Clair County, but as a region, the poverty, the crime, the issues of governance that we have in East St. Louis and the surrounding communities there are, to me, the main challenge. That's where the fight is. That's where the main focus of our efforts as a community needs to be, in my opinion. Again, we have many problems we have to deal with, but if you're talking about economic development, if you're talking about sustainability of our region, talking about the future of our region, you're talking about Scott Air Force Base, you're talking about development, one of the things that will always sort of be a drag on us and prevent us from reaching our full potential is our inability and our failure at this point to deal with in a comprehensive way the issues of poverty and violence in East St. Louis and those areas.
Now, I want to point out to people, oftentimes folks from outside of St. Clair County, outside of Metro East, even people who are right across the river in St. Louis, when they look at Metro East, they're thinking East St. Louis and think that this whole region is
right,
just like that. In fact, East St. Louis is just a small corner of a very, very large county, isn't it?
It is, it is.
I mean, you've got a huge variety of places in St. Clair County, as does Madison County.
We've got everything that you've got in any other part of America. We have urban areas, we have suburban areas, we have rural areas. I've got everything from the Mississippi River all the way out to Marissa. and everything in between, and all the way down to East Carondelet, all the way up to Fairmont City, and then out to Lebanon. And so I have suburban areas which are very affluent. I have urban areas which have higher rates of poverty, and we have
lots of farming.
Lots of farming. So all the challenges that you can find in any part of the United States of America, we've got in St. Clair County. But we also have the good things that you can find in America too, are also in St. Clair County. We do have some great community. We have some great thriving areas. And we also have some corners and pockets within places like East St. Louis, Brooklyn, Allerton, Washington Park, where people are trying to turn the corner, trying to make it a safe community.
Beautiful neighborhoods still in
Yes.
East St. People forget that back in, say, 1965, East St. Louis was a place where people used to go to shop. I mean, from all over. They come from St. Louis to go over there.
And there's no reason it shouldn't be that in the future. But I think the critical first step, it is a chicken and the egg, but a critical first step, I think, to moving forward in terms of economic development and dealing with the poverty issues there is the safety issue. No one's going to want to invest. No one's going to want to build. No one's going to want to put in a strip mall or a factory or distribution center in those areas if they don't think it's safe.
Well, you're quoted as saying that even though they have something like 60-some police officers, or is it 40-some police officers?
55 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you were thinking that they really need something more in the 80s.
Well, I'll tell you, 10 years ago, they had 110. So while the population has gone down, and that's been in my mind.
What is the population, by the way?
It's about, in East St. Louis, it's about 25, 26,000.
See, that's it. It's just people.
But we've got Washington Park,
idea.
though,
You got this very small population area that's just become.
But you do have about 1,000 or so in Brooklyn. You have a couple thousand in Allerton, and you have about 4,000 or 5,000 in Washington Park. So you're talking about 40,000 people where the police services are, in terms of manpower and resources, are way behind what they need for the crime and the issues that they're dealing with. Now East St. Louis, the city itself, has made some efforts to increase the number of police officers, which is good, but it's a slow process. You're adding 1, 2, 3, 4 guys over a year. They need to get back up to a much higher number. The Illinois State Police, however, I'm very thankful, they have committed additional manpower to that area. They investigate every single murder which occurs in those 4 communities. So, for example, if you had a murder in Edwardsville, they might investigate, the Edwardsville police might investigate it. They may, depending on the circumstances, call in the major case squad for assistance, or they may not. But as a matter of policy, the Illinois State Police investigate every single murder in those 4 communities to assist them with that, because in many cases they don't have the capacity or the expertise, the CSI type training that you need. They have some of it. And again, East St. Louis is a bigger department, and so they have some of those resources, but they rely on the Illinois State Police to help. We also have MEGSI, which is down there, the Metro East Enforcement Group of Southern Illinois, which focuses primarily on drugs. But again, they're doing a lot of work in East St. Louis. We now have something called MEPAT, which is the Metro East Police Assistance Team. Myself and other community leaders have lobbied for about 2.5 years to get additional graduating classes of troopers for the Illinois State Police. Legislature last year committed to that. They did get additional manpower. The governor committed to that, and they sent 12 additional bodies just to focus on the folks that are in that community that are likely to shoot or be shot, to focus on the factors that give rise to those homicides. So there's some good things going on there in addition to what assistance we've been receiving from the federal government, from the Department of Justice. But it is still not a priority for the broader community, in my mind. We haven't got business engaged the way we need to. We haven't got labor engaged the way we need to. They all recognize it as a huge challenge. Everyone recognizes that. But getting them engaged, that's a challenge.
I have read recently, because I did research before you come on, and I saw that Mayor Parks, and I don't know that this happened, I think this happened in June, was talking, we need to have more of those strip clubs. And we have to have longer hours. He wanted to keep them open till 5:30 in the morning because apparently that brings in more tax money. And he said that when he cut back from 3 to 2, that he lost 150 employees. That's not the kind of economic development you were referring to, was it?
No, it was not. And I have to say, since we fought that fight with the mayor has since, and my impression is that he's changed his mind about that issue. He has not tried to reverse the city council He has not tried to go back to the later hours. I think the feedback he's gotten from some of the business owners and the feedback that he's gotten from the public is that the 2 a.m. cutoff is a good thing. The East St. Louis police are overburdened, running from homicide to homicide, from shot to shot, and while all of those club events and the people coming in from outside the community, not in East St. Louis, but from outside the community, were causing problems and contributing to the public safety concerns in East St. Louis. Not having them there after 2 a.m. at least gives the police a little bit more breathing room. It gives law enforcement a little more breathing room. They can do a little more patrolling. They can do a little more proactive stuff instead of reacting to little incidences or sometimes major incidences of violence at these nightclubs, which again were people who were not from the community. It was not East St. Louis people that were involved in these things. It was people coming from all around because that's the place where things are still open at that hour. I think that I have not heard any intention by anyone on the East St. Louis City Council, including the mayor, to try to undo that work. I think that it has proven to be a positive thing. The concern that we have now and that we're working with Washington Park and Brooklyn and Allerton with is their hours, because their hours continue to be late. What they've seen is an influx of folks who used to be in East St. Louis are now coming to some of their liquor stores and to some of the packaged liquor sellers that are in their communities, and then walking back over to East St. Louis. So it's a bit of a whack-a-mole type of thing, but we keep at it, and I think that that fight with the mayor, I think, is mostly over, and I think he has been very committed to the Metro East Police Commission. He's trying to come up with solutions. It's no easy job to be the state's attorney, but I also recognize that it's a lot of hazards in being the mayor of East St. Louis as well. So
yes.
We work with who we can. That is not to say that we can't have fights and differences, and he recognizes that my role is law enforcement, and his role is different from time to time.
He's managing.
Yeah, he's managing, and sometimes it's not easy. But I think we fight those fights, and we talk together in good faith, and we try to keep making progress where we can. He's the duly elected mayor of East St. Louis, and we're going to keep working with whoever's there.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's back up a step
Sure.
or two. How did you get into this in the first place? You're from the area originally?
Well, I guess I would say that I'm from the area. I've been here in 26 years. My mother and father were both employees of the Department of the Air Force. My mother still works for the Department of the Air Force. She's at the Pentagon. Actually works for DOD, Department of Defense. We lived I was born in Tampa, Florida, actually. My mother was from Indiana, Vincennes, Indiana, and my dad was from New York City. His grandfather was a New York City, his father was a New York City police officer, my grandfather. They met in Tampa. So
you're a military brat.
I'm half Hoosier, half Yankee, and born in Florida, and then we moved everywhere and wound up at Scott Air Force Base. So the importance of Scott Air Force Base to us as a community can't ever be underestimated in my mind. That's why I'm here. But we came to this place. This wound up being home for me, and I'm very glad because it's a great place to be. I went to high school here, and then I went off to the University of Notre Dame for undergrad, and then I was a naval officer.
What did you study there?
International relations and government, and I served in the Navy for 4 years as an officer in the United States Navy over in the Middle East and in the United States.
You did logistics too.
I did some logistics. Yeah, I was a supply officer on the USS Heron, in addition to the other duties that I had to carry on as a naval officer, surface warfare officer. I also had to be the supply officer. So I had to make sure we didn't crash the ship, but I also had to make sure we had enough food and toilet paper on the ship. So those were my duties, among many others, as a naval officer.
SWO officer being the SUPO.
Well, it is a little strange, but on small ships, the mine hunter that I was on, the USS Heron, which has now been decommissioned and sold to the Greeks, that ship was so small that as soon as I showed up, I was the junior officer, but I was also the third highest ranking person on the ship the day I got there. And that's because we have a small crew.
As an ensign?
As an ensign, yes, because you only have about 40 or 50 guys on one of those ships. And so all the duties that you have on a regular sized ship, someone's got to do those things. So we all wore multiple hats. And so I did mine warfare. I was a surface warfare officer. I was a senior watch officer at one point. I was the supply officer, the food officer, the chaplain at one point, which my wife and kids find hilarious in some ways. I'm not particularly holy man at all times, but it was good being the chaplain on the ship and reading the evening prayer at night and doing those sort of duties. It was probably better for me than it was for everybody else, but it was a great experience, and it was a great experience learning how to be in charge, learning how to make decisions, learning how to have people that may have more experience and wisdom than you who are serving under you, and being able to
learn how to listen.
And listen
Yes.
to what they had to say, take their advice, and then learn to make your own decision based upon that information. And I think that's been an invaluable thing for me to have done in the position that I have now. And essentially the main thing that I do as state's attorney is make decisions. You got to make a decision. Mm-hmm. And you can't put those things off. You may have to mull them over from time to time. You may have to see how it settles in your mind, but you're making decisions about who gets charged, who doesn't, who goes to prison, who doesn't, who gets deprived of their liberty and who doesn't. Which victim who is angry and upset and wants justice from the justice system, you have to sometimes tell them, look, we don't have the evidence, and we still have, the defendants have rights in this country under our Bill of Rights, and we can't convict somebody or charge somebody on a hunch or on what in our gut. We know what happened, but we have to do it based on evidence. And so making those decisions on a daily basis, while it can be draining from time to time, it's an exciting thing.
That? When you, I mean, the person feels in their bone, this is the guy, okay, and you tell them, oh, well, you know, there's a process. What's the...
I think it depends on the nature of the case, but let's take, for example, a murder case. There's a reason we don't have a statute of limitations on murder cases, because we may think we have this guy right now, that this guy committed a murder yesterday, and we think this is probably our main suspect, but we don't have enough to hold him, we don't have enough to charge him, but guess what? He'll say something stupid. His friend will say something stupid. He'll slip up. Some witness will come forward, or we'll find some piece of evidence that we didn't have before, and then then we'll take a shot at him. DNA, fingerprints, the weapon, some kind of video that we didn't have before, or he's off to prison for some other charge, which we often have, where we're able to get him on some other lesser offense, and while he's sitting in jail, he's bragging that he did X, Y, or Z, and we can use that information too. And so in those situations where you have the victim or the victim's family and you're trying to explain your decision making, the best thing to do, the thing that I always do, is you bring them into the office and you look them in the eye and you just tell them the facts. You tell them the truth. Sugarcoating it and saying, you know, gosh, wish we could, you know, and also pretending like you know what they're going through. You don't know what they're going through. You shouldn't pretend like you understand the pain. I've never had a family member murdered, and so I don't want to ever have that experience, but I also don't want to portray a false sort of sympathy to the victims and patronize them and say everything's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay. And the justice system is not there, unfortunately, to make them feel whole again. They never will. There are crimes which are so horrible that you can never overcome that. But what it is there for is to hold that person accountable, for there to be a consequence, for there to be some sense of justice and peace for the family or the victims that are involved, and to also send, more importantly, I think, a deterrent message to others who would consider those actions later. Again, it seems sometimes that our system is unsatisfactory in that it doesn't produce the results that we want, and people get frustrated. But I tell you, having been all over the world in the Navy and even as a kid when we lived overseas, I went to communist East Berlin. You can feel there's a difference there. And as while our country has a huge number of imperfections, and while we have many, many challenges, I still think our system of government, our system of justice, our system of rule of law is still the best in the world compared to what you see around the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. So while it can be discouraging at times and it requires a great deal of patience, our system does work on the whole.
So after you graduated from law school, then you went to work for the St. Clair County prosecutor's office.
Yes, correct.
So, like your juniors, that was you years ago.
Yes, yeah, not too long ago, honestly.
Then all of a sudden you decided, well, I want to go into politics.
Well, I think there was a...
Because when you ran for the clerk's job,
sure,
the clerk of the courts, that's a political job.
It is, it is. It's the ministerial duty of the judicial system. You're not a judge in that situation.
Yeah, you're the paperwork guy.
But you make sure the system works. And again, those things are important too. And another little lesson from the Navy, I mean, you don't win a war with tactics or because you think, you know, you have the right on your side. You win a war because you make sure you got enough food, and toilet paper, and ammunition. The bureaucracy has to be behind it. And for our judicial system to work, you have to have an effective bureaucracy. We hate that word bureaucracy, but it's pretty important. When you want a copy of this, when you want a record of that, when you want to have somebody make sure that you're scheduled at the right time for your court date, someone managing all those things, you need an efficient and effective bureaucracy.
Well, you must have done an effective job when they thought of somebody to replace the judge when he.
Well, I mean,
the state's attorney to become judge. That became you.
I hope so. I'm sure.
Now you're a political leader in St. Louis County.
Sure, correct, and it is an elected position, the state's attorney,
right.
And I think sometimes that can make the job a little more difficult.
You got reelected. Well, you were appointed, but then
correct.
you got elected in 2012
correct.
in that election.
So
you're not up this year.
No, I'm not. I'm in the middle of my first full term. That's correct. And it is an elected position, and I think sometimes that can create unique stresses because you're accountable to the public, even though you're going to make some decisions which sometimes can make the public angry. But you have to do what the law requires you to do. You take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and sometimes upholding that oath is not pleasant because the result can be infuriating. But you have to do that. You have to treat everybody the same. Sometimes it feels like to others that, well, you didn't treat everybody the same. Well, you have to go back and look at it, and you're like any umpire. You got to call balls and strikes, and hopefully you get most of them right. I'm sure there are some decisions that are wrong, some decisions that are right, but on the whole, I think that we try to uphold the oath that we have. But I don't know that it's bad that it's an elected position, because I think when you go into that courtroom as the state's attorney, you're not there representing the state. That's not what it says on the document. It's not the state versus so-and-so. It's the people versus Mr. Smith, whoever it may be.
And you have to have their confidence.
And you do, and you have to communicate with them. You have to have that relationship with them, and you have to explain those decisions to them. I know it may seem like sometimes we're out there in the newspaper all the time or on TV all the time. I am, but I feel that it's important to explain those decisions because that's who my client is as an attorney. My client is the public, is the people. And I think the only way you can have a good relationship with your client is if you communicate with them.
So what's next for Brendan Kelly?
What's next is we still have a lot of things to do.
No, I meant after you have burned yourself out on being state's attorney.
Well, yeah, some days it feels like you're burnt out, doesn't it? Yeah, that's for sure. Some days that you reach that kind of, I've had enough here. You know, when your computer says your memory is full. You know, there are days like that. But I tell you, I didn't expect to be the circuit clerk. I didn't expect to be the state's attorney. So I don't know what the future holds for me. You just don't know. I just think you just do a good job in the position that you're at. And if I'm state's attorney for the next 20 years, and I think that's a great kind of life to have and a great thing to do for your community and a position
Bill
to be in.
was
Sure.
state's attorney for I forget how many years.
I don't know.
I mean, it
yeah.
seems like it was almost 20 years.
Yeah, and my predecessor was there for 20 years. And I think that is unusual because I think if you're keeping that high pace and if you're really hammering away at it, you get a little burnout. But I have very good people that work for me. I'm very blessed to have employees that and prosecutors that are experienced, but also they have a lot of energy and they give a damn about their community. I think that's kind of our philosophy. I know it's not something you want to say in the schoolyard or in a classroom, but that's kind of what it comes down to: caring, going the extra mile. Working with the police. Look, they may not have their reports there, they may not have everything ready, but they've been up for 48 hours, okay? We're going to go ahead and move forward on this case, trusting that they're going to get us the evidence later. And if they don't, then you can say, hey, I'm going to dismiss this case if you don't get it to me tomorrow. But you work with them, and you do that in good faith, and you do that with community organizations as well, with the NAACP, with other community groups. You keep hammering away at it, and it can be tough and exhausting, but I think it's a great job to have, and I'm very lucky to have what I've gotten to be in this position. So what the future holds beats me. Who knows? We'll see.
Here in the last 4 minutes, and time does go by fast here,
yeah.
You've handled a number of corruption cases in St. Clair County. So
Sure.
just briefly go over what have you accomplished?
Well, I think
in other words, did you just take one guy out and then all of a sudden the next corrupt one comes in?
Well, sometimes that's the way it goes. Sometimes you go after one thing and you pull on that string and it leads to something else, and then that leads to something else, and that's the way some of these cases unfold sometimes. But I do think back in September of 2011, we did take sort of a stand, not just sort of a stand. We did take a stand and say, these are issues which undermine our ability to do our jobs as prosecutors. These are issues which undermine the future of our community. It makes people not trust the system. So we've tried to push, with the limited resources we have, we've tried to push forward on at least getting felony convictions or some kind of cooperation agreement that leads us to another case in these public corruption cases. And we're probably about, I don't know, 22, 23 cases in terms of the public corruption cases that we've done since September of 2011, when we said this is something we're going to concentrate on, this is something we're going to prioritize. We have elected officials that we've prosecuted. We have public officials like police officers that we have prosecuted, public employees, and those things can be range from drugs, those things can be theft, they can be benefits fraud. We just recently got a felony conviction in a case that the FBI, a case that they passed on to us that they were not able to make with their federal thresholds, and they said, look, this is someone abusing stimulus funds that were designed to help poor people get back to work during the Great Recession, and they were basically using it as a piggy bank for themselves. But this is a case which we can't make federally, you go for it. So over the past 2 years, we built that case up slowly but surely, getting cooperating witnesses, and the main person was convicted of a felony last week.
Do you have a whole unit in your office that just works on this, or this is like just as it comes up?
It just as it comes up. But I think primarily it's something that myself and my first assistant have focused on. I think violent crime, we have a violent crime unit. Children's issues, we have the Children's Justice Unit, division, which includes crimes against children, juvenile delinquency, juvenile abuse and neglect, truancy, child support. All those issues are together now. But I think as far as making public corruption a priority, that's something that has to come from the top, in my opinion. And having a strategy going forward. It's been, if you look at the history of it since 1980 or so, it's hard to get convictions in those cases. The juries tend to, they quit sometimes. They think, well, what's the big deal? And I think that attitude has changed among the public. I think with Blagojevich and those other scandals that we've seen, I think there's a much less tolerance and an attitude where you just don't wink and say, what's the big deal?
That's Illinois?
That's Illinois. You can't do that. You can't have that attitude. That's an unacceptable attitude to have. And I think that most of the public opinion has changed about that. But I think those are also difficult cases because sometimes they're a bit of a he said, she said. So our goal is always, in those cases, to see if we can get a conviction. Either get them to cooperate to help us get the bigger fish, or get a felony conviction, hold them accountable, get them out of their public office, and let people know that you can't do that.
That's all the time we have this time.
Okay.
We'll have to have you back.
Sure, absolutely.
Because there was all these other areas that I was prepared to talk about, but the stuff we covered was really great.
We'll
Thanks
do it
very
again.
much for
Great,
being
thank
with
you,
us.
sir. Appreciate it.
And to my audience, I've been speaking with Brendan Kelly. He is the state's attorney for St. Clair County, Illinois. If you enjoyed this and would like to show it to someone else, this is going to be uploaded to YouTube. Just go to Conversation with Lee Presser at YouTube and look up Brendan Kelly. Thank you very much. I'm Lee Presser. Goodbye.